What's up, Applied English? I want to thank so many of you for bearing with me today while I am out of building and working really well for my substitute teachers as well. Obviously, watching this video as a way to work through quotation marks in a way that works really smoothly for us. I did want to start by looking at today's agenda real briefly up on screen, mostly as a reminder that my only homework assignment for you is to keep working on your past, present, future writing project. You should have an outline. If you need a new copy of it, be sure to pick one up just by the end of class today on top of the Chromebook cart. We will take these next couple of days after today as outlining days in class, but I would like to have a chance to give some comments on those in this upcoming weekend. Until then, as you guys know, you're working on quotation marks today. You should have a copy of our quotation marks notes and practice. It's notes on the front, little practice activity on the back. I'll lead you through this just on video here, so we'll walk through the notes real slowly first of all. The practice on the back, we'll see if I have time to read them out loud, but otherwise those are for you to work on with your pod. We should be able to complete them and turn them in class today. Again, I have no other assignment planned for you after class, so let's get quotation marks done first here. And again, you should have this document in front of you. I should say, feel free to pause this video at any point if I am teaching this too quickly, or if you need a chance to kind of pause and discuss what's going on in these notes and practices as well. I'm going to try to keep the video itself fairly short. So we're looking at quotation marks here. One thing I should note is that one reason why I want us to look at quotation marks today is some of you might find these extremely helpful or extremely useful in your writing project. Depending on what you're writing about from your past, it is very possible that some of you may need to use quotation marks, may need to use what people have said to you, especially as you tell your story from the past. I might also recommend trying to mix in things like famous quotes that you find inspirational. Maybe something like a quote that really sticks with you in your body. A powerful quote might be a good way to conclude as a final thought as you're outlining for your writing project as well. So it's very possible that you'll find quotation marks very helpful on this project. I want you to know how to use them well as we get to writing here. So there are a couple of rules that we'll cover with quotation marks. I should note we are just doing the basics this year. You'll build on this more in English 1, more in English 2. If you ever take a writing workshop with me in the future, you'll learn just about everything you would ever need to know about quotation marks there. So the main rule for quotation marks, we use double quotation marks to set off a direct quotation. So anytime we need to represent exactly what someone says, that's what we use quotation marks for the most. This is their most common usage. There are a couple of grammar rules that we should be aware of when it comes to quotation marks as well. First of all, if you ever have periods or commas, like especially towards the end of a quote, those are always going to go inside of quotation marks. The little jingle that I was taught in high school is 1 dot in, 2 dots out. That's what it's all about. 1 dot in, periods and commas go inside of quotation marks, especially at the end of a quote. Things like semicolons and colons, double dot punctuation stays out. Question marks and exclamation marks, sometimes they'll go in, sometimes they stay out. That one just depends on the situation that you're writing in. Another little grammatical rule as well. Anytime you're starting a quotation, we're going to treat it like the beginning of a new sentence. So we are going to capitalize the first word within a quotation. I'm going to go ahead and underline just the things that I typed in for you guys as you fill in the blanks as well. I suppose another grammatical rule that I should make sure is clear here when it comes to quotation marks is that quotation marks always come in pairs. So if you open quotation marks before a word or before a phrase or before a sentence, somewhere down the line you're going to have to close those quotation marks as well. These things never come alone. They always come in sets of 2. So again, capitalize the first word within a quotation, treat it like a new sentence in that respect. Again, feel free to pause if I'm going too quickly. I think as complex as I want to get when it comes to grammar on quotation marks is what happens if you have a quotation that is broken by a phrase. We'll see what that means in just a moment here. But if you do have a quotation, a single quote that's broken in the middle by a phrase, you do need to close quotation marks on both sides. You don't necessarily need to capitalize when it picks up again. It's easiest to understand that as we look at an example. So this is in your notes, but I'll walk through it on screen as well. So we got Tommy here, and he says, "I'll buy the piñata, but I won't buy the candy." So notice that the whole quote is "I'll buy the piñata, but I won't buy the candy." But the writer decided to get creative and break that quote in half with "said Tommy." Writers are allowed to do that. You are allowed to do that. But notice that we do need two sets of quotation marks. The first half, "I'll buy the piñata." Commas go inside of quotation marks, like we talked about a moment ago. Notice that we don't have to recapitalize when we continue the quote with "but." So it has its own set of quotation marks, but it's just a continuation of that quote. "But I won't buy the candy." Again, periods go inside of quotation marks as well. There is a "your turn" sentence right there. I would encourage you to pause for a moment and try it on your own. Otherwise, I'm going to walk through it real briefly anyway. All right, so we've got Sandra yelled, comma, "Get the ball, Jimbo." There's a couple of reasons why it should be easy to place quotation marks before the G in get and after the exclamation mark. For one, we have Sandra yelled and a comma. Commas are oftentimes used to introduce quotes. So notice here, yelled is telling us that some kind of quotation is coming up. Notice that the G in get is capitalized. Capitalize the first word within a quotation. I did put the exclamation mark inside of the quotes here because the exclamation mark belongs with Jimbo. It is part of the quote that Sandra yelled. I do want to make sure that stays inside of quotation marks. Once again, that first rule is the most important one, and it's the one that probably applies the most to anything you write in here, is that when you are giving a direct quote, whether it's a famous quote or whether it's something someone else said to you, we want to make sure those are inside of quotation marks. Scooching forward, there are two smaller rules that we want to cover today as well. Rule number 2 is one that you might see a little bit this year. Rule number 3 is a bonus that I want you to be aware of. So, rule number 2, when do we use double quotation marks around single words or phrases? This would be for identifying specific terms, could be dictionary definitions or a word you're trying to define. It could be a slang term that you are trying to explain in writing. This would also apply to titles of things, titles of shorter things like songs, short stories, poems. They go in quotation marks as well. So for example, dealing with slang, let's say I'm writing an essay and I have to explain what no cap means, right? I know that's a slang term, right? I'm placing it in quotation marks to show my readers that I know it's a slang term. But notice here, I've got no cap means for real or no lie. So notice that the quotation marks go around the slang term itself, that phrase, to explain what it means. But then I've also put quotation marks around those definitions I'm giving it as well. Again, quotation marks around single words or phrases have more to do with explaining meanings of smaller things. The same thing is true for, again, titles of songs, short stories, poems. That's what this "your turn" is all about. So again, take a moment, try this "your turn" sentence on your own. In just a moment, I'll walk through it anyway. All right, y'all, let's talk about song titles. So my two favorite songs by the hip-hop artist No Big Dill are "Sleepin'" and "Go With The Ghost." What we would have to do for quotation marks here is put them around "Sleepin'." That's one song. Notice that we did mention "to" earlier in the sentence there. So the other one would have to be, after the "and," "Go With The Ghost." Periods go inside of quotation marks no matter what. Rule number 3 is a bonus. Single quotation marks. So sometimes you will be reading and you'll notice that there are things inside of single quotation marks instead of double quotation marks. The question is, what's the deal with that, right? These ones are rather tough. This is what we would do if we have a quotation inside of a quotation. It is possible to do that in writing. Again, these are kind of tricky, so I won't necessarily throw any of these at you on a quiz or a test, but I want you to know how to spot these as well. So let's say we've got Marco here, and he's kind of upset, and he says, "She told me I look like a cheap knockoff of John Legend," right? So the whole sentence, "She told me I look like a cheap knockoff of John Legend," comma, inside of quotes, cried Marco. Marco starts by saying "she told me," but then he also has what she said inside of the quote, like a cheap knockoff of John Legend. He's direct quoting her, so that goes in single quotes. And then once again, the rest of the sentence goes in double quotes right there. I know that looks a little bit weird with all the punctuation marks in there, but I want you to know that that is possible. This is something that I do review with my upperclassmen in writing workshop every year as well. I do not think I have time to read these out loud. I want to make sure I respect your time to work on these in class. So all it says is add in the missing quotation marks in each sentence. I am not making you rewrite sentences. You certainly can if you like. But if you're more comfortable just adding quotation marks where they belong, you absolutely can. Please remember that quotation marks come in pairs. So let's say you want to add quotation marks to start the sentence at "look out." You and your pod would have to decide where we end those quotation marks as well. They always come in pairs. They have to open somewhere and they have to close somewhere as well. Again, I will not read these sentences out loud in the interest of time. I do recommend that you and your pod read them out loud to help you place quotation marks. But otherwise, this is a practice you should be able to turn in today in class. Hopefully you have lots of time, so maybe you can discuss some with your teacher as well. But I will leave that up to my substitute teachers. I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day. I will be back in the building in the afternoon, so feel free to come see me later if you have any questions for me. Otherwise, please complete this in class. You can obviously keep working on your writing project outline as we prep for tomorrow. As always, until then, peace.